Hello and welcome to another episode of Literary Gladiators, the show where we discuss and debate literature in all of its forms. If it's written work, it's game. Let's meet the panel.
I'm Larry.
Amber. Sam.
And I'm Josh. Today we have two people from one of my favorite multi-person channels. I would say that at the moment they are my second favorite multi-person.
Hey.
You may recognize, because Betwixt the Books is a channel that we're very close with. You probably recognize Amber from two previous discussions that we've had about Doctor Who Borrowed Time and the Short Happy Life of Francis McCumber. Joining us for the very first time is her cohort from the Drunken Library in Sam. So Sam, welcome to our channel.
Thanks.
You can also find Amber on Amber Unabridged and Sam on Sarcasm and Sci-Fi. Is there anything that you would want our viewers to know about your group channel or individual channels?
So our group channel it's a pretty straightforward concept. We read a book together and then we get drunk and talk about it. It leads to some shenanigans, certainly.
So many shenanigans.
Yeah, especially if we aren't thinking about how much we're drinking beforehand. Technically been making videos since like 2014-ish together, but we took like a three-year break
hiatus,
in there. So we just recently came back and started releasing some stuff. So you can see older and newer stuff at the Drunken Library. My individual channel, Sarcasm and Sci-Fi, is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. I read a lot of sci-fi. I have a really dry sense of humor. And also I have made it my personal mission to make sci-fi accessible to everybody, because I firmly believe that if you don't like it, it's because you haven't found the right one yet.
And my channel, Amber Unabridged, is kind of a hodgepodge of random shit. I like a lot of Japanese literature. That's kind of what I've been leaning hard into lately. And I've got this really, really ambitious project coming up where I'm going to be reading The Tale of Genji and doing videos about each chapter as I go. I'm opening it up as a read along, so anybody's welcome to join for that. I like doing short story reviews, and I like I've been talking about like just reading updates, generally keeping people up to date, what I've been reading, what I'm planning to read, that kind of thing.
Very impressive projects you have going on, and I definitely encourage you to check out their group channel and their individual channels. I've shouted them out in Pay It Forward for all three. So tonight we are the Drunken Gladiators.
I like it.
I like it.
I'm pretty sure the males on this panel are sober. After saying what we're going over today,
I also have water because drink responsibly.
I don't have water because I'm apparently less responsible.
Well, we knew that.
I have water, but I don't feel like getting up to get it right now.
Fair.
While the males on this panel are perfectly sober, perhaps we may wish that we were following the trend of the females on the panel. We're going to be going over a science fiction work called The Star Fox by Poul Anderson. I'll throw the discussion starter out there, and because it's very challenging to summarize, I'm just going to read the back of the book to let everybody know what it's about. No one will believe the truth about the Ilarionia people's plot to claim the almost untouched planet of New Europe. Only Gunnar Heim, space-age patriot, will risk his own death and the destruction of interplanetary peace to bring freedom to this strange new world of surreal people, walking forests, slaughter machines, and the haunting memories of lost love. The discussion starter that I have for this is, the Star Fox was nominated for a Nebula Award in 1966 and won an Appreciation Prometheus Award in 1995, aka was inducted into their Hall of Fame. Prometheus Award is awarded to works that are viewed as great examples of libertarian science fiction. Where do you believe this book displays liberty, and why is it you believe you do not hear much about this book and about Poul Anderson, but yet you hear about his contemporaries and specifically the winner of the 1966 Nebula Award, which is Dune by Frank Herbert?
This book specifically, I think you don't hear about super often for a couple of reasons. One being that it is one of Poul Anderson's earlier books, and I think at least among vintage sci-fi reading circles, which is my people for some reason, a lot of his later books gained a little bit more popularity. I'm still not super familiar with him, and honestly, based on this, I don't know that I want to be. I think that's part of it, and I think the second part is that this book specifically got so overshadowed by Dune that like won the Nebula that year and by like Frank Herbert as a whole, that I think this one just kind of fell through the cracks of people's awareness.
That's good for them though.
I'm not familiar.
Because Dune's not great either.
I have not read Frank Herbert yet. From what I can
Same.
gather, his universe that he created with Dune is so fleshed out.
It's a lot of book. It's a long book and it's actually a series.
I knew it was a series.
And there's a lot happening in those books, and it's very well fleshed out. And I will say, this being as short as it is, does come across a little more rushed, and you don't get a full picture of anything.
It fleshes out in the wrong areas.
We were talking about that right before this chat, actually.
The characters are very one-dimensional.
Mm-hmm.
Feels like you're entering the story. It's like going to a party, missing the introduction. So you have no idea who anybody is. Are able to gather, it's a little too late.
Yeah, and then you meet everyone and you don't like them that much.
No, you don't. Nobody was really that likable. Everybody was very...
No, it's yeah. You go to a party, and for some reason, like the friend you were supposed to go with bailed on you,
Mm-hmm.
and like you don't know anybody who's there, and it is clearly not a crowd of people you want to hang out with. So you feel awkward introducing yourself to them, and so you just stand in a corner talking to the dog and eating chips the whole night.
Yeah, maybe the friend would have been helpful if they decided to show up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But they knew what you were getting into, and they were like, "No, I'm out."
The characters were very stereotypical. The daughter, especially.
Every woman, basically, poorly written.
Not uncommon at that
Poorly
time,
written,
unfortunately.
And the 15-year-old daughter definitely comes across as like 7, the way that she's written.
Yeah, she's written very, very childlike for a teenager. She giggles a lot and doesn't seem to have any real world awareness of anything, which is a little upsetting because I feel like there's also like a 19-year-old woman in this that is written in more of like a love interest way.
Yeah.
And 15 to 19 are not that different.
You're talking about Jocelyn?
No, Danielle.
Jocelyn was his former flame.
And then his other former flame, whose name?
Magdalene?
Madeline. I read it like Madeline.
Yeah, but it's spelled with like
it's
O-N.
spelled, yeah.
What? Yeah.
So Danielle is Madeline's daughter. So Haim knew Madeline when he was in the Navy and he had leave time on New Europe, and him and Madeline had a fling. And then he left and he went and married Connie, with whom he had his daughter. And at some point he cheated on her, Jocelyn. But then when New Europe came under some trouble because of the Alionians,
there's a lot of
Illyrians,
terminology that's difficult to pronounce.
He had to rush there to help everybody, but we don't find out until the third part of the book that a big motivation for him rushing to help the people on the planet are because his old flame from 20 years prior was there.
There is some foreshadowing for that.
Oh, okay.
It's mentioned within like the first 20 pages.
Okay, I didn't catch that bit. But then he shows up, and then she's married with 4 kids, and her oldest kid is a daughter who's 19, and then things get weird.
Back to Lisa, though, his daughter. I thought that when she was kidnapped and he first is able to get in touch with her, I thought that the way that was handled was so inconsistent. I would think that there would be more panicking.
Considering she was like his only like real close relationship, the only kind of connection he had to his wife and to anyone, and he at the very beginning seemed so concerned with her well-being, and in line with that you would think there'd be like some panic.
Yeah, and instead it was just like, okay, here's what I have to do, and it's a risk, but it's gonna work out. And I'm like, you don't risk that if you're worried about the well-being of your daughter. And that's
like half of his character though, is like, well, I don't really know what I'm doing, it's a risk, but I'm gonna do it anyway.
He's also an alcoholic.
There is that also.
Somehow that escaped me.
I mean, granted,
I had a lot going on. I escaped the alcoholism somehow. I really didn't notice that at all.
Granted, General Grant was able to be decisive despite his alcoholism. He was able to drive the Union to victory. It shouldn't really matter, but in this case, it doesn't really do much help to his character. I mean, honestly, maybe at the end.
Half of our.
I was gonna say half of our state are alcoholics, and they function just perfectly fine. So
I mean, do they?
No, I don't know.
No, I was gonna say in general too. I think it's the military fiction. I think there's a lot of like alcohol rampant in like military fiction, and honestly, in the military in general, right? Like actually.
Yeah.
But I do think military fiction, military sci-fi, honestly, the fact that this is military sci-fi might be part of why I didn't care for it, because it's just not my subgenre.
And it didn't do anything to engage you into converting it. It didn't do that.
Yeah, this did not. If anything, it reaffirmed my opinions. If if anything would do it, it would have been Starship Troopers, because I had an in, because I already loved the movie and the book just made me upset. But this one, yeah, it reaffirmed, like, I don't know if I want to read any more military sci-fi from like 50s, 60s era. I mean, I probably still will, if I'm being honest.
You want to say anything, Larry?
Something boring, not really meant to be remembered. It's a piece of escapist, easy in, easy out. Like not to be thought much about or remembered or anything like that. It's just pulp. You know what I mean? So nothing significant.
I think that Anderson was trying to get at something, but between the execution and the test of time, it became irrelevant.
You can't find anything about this story anywhere, right? Like, I mean, I tried to find something on it just to get like a summary or people's opinions. Just very little. There's very, very little out there.
Yeah, it's not super well known. I will say, I think in the execution, it did not accomplish being remembered, but I do think he was trying for something. And because this is, again, and this is going to sound like not trying to be like a pretentious dick about it, but I've read a lot of this stuff. So I'm usually able to pick up on like the tropes and the conventions within 15 pages.
Yeah, I didn't pick up on this at all.
No, and she was like, I did not get that at all.
Okay.
This was, to me, it was very, very clearly a pro-Vietnam War novel.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen people say that.
Yeah, it was very much that Earthlings are doing anything to buy peace, and we cannot stand by and do that. War is the answer if we want real peace. If you look at some of the descriptions, it's not super obvious. It's a little more subtle, but it's very much like an Asian race.
And as far as libertarian science fiction is concerned, it contradicts the whole idea of liberty and libertarianism, because it's about, you would imagine that it would be more isolationist and more about individual will. Haim is more of he's a maverick, where he goes against the instruction of Simbi Ru Tarin. It really doesn't get anywhere. I know they lay out all of these constitutional laws addressing 13 points. In 1984, the book within a book, they do a heck of a lot better than
if your theory is correct, and this is supposed to be Vietnam War propaganda, then I think that just substantiates my point that this was not really meant to withstand the test of time, right? It was there.
It didn't accomplish anything.
Maybe in the moment it got people on, but I don't think so.
This was at the beginning of the Vietnam War, the beginning of when it was being escalated. It was around the time that Lyndon Johnson was sending more troops to Nam.
It was very much hey, we're at the beginning of this conflict. I think we should fight, because if we don't fight, nobody wins. I think that's what the idea was. I don't think it was done well at all, but I do think that's what he was going for.
Let's be honest. In this book, nothing was done well.
Correct.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
There was this thing that was driving me absolutely crazy as I was reading it. Sam summarized it in one sentence, and I was just like, yo,
I don't even know
you're like, wow, this author really has a problem with quotation marks.
Sure does.
Or something. And I was like, dude.
Yeah, convention. Not very conventional when it comes to the paragraphs, and having everything the way it's supposed to be is not there.
Cormac McCarthy's not that good with
I'm not a
quotation
fan
marks
either of when people who know a lot of languages kind of show that off all the time.
Yeah.
He did an atrocious job. With his way of language is just replacing some letters with others. There you go. You have an accent.
And it wasn't even the letters that would typically be used phonetically for that accent. It was just random letters.
And
also,
sometimes
just putting random French phrases throughout. That your reader does not know that language.
He's like, I know some French,
right?
And I still barely understand what's going on.
Unless it's a French
it's
reader,
either you don't care that your readers are not going to understand this because it's not important, in which case then why even bother with it? Or else you just don't care because you don't care. So whatever.
I just think that the use of the page count was atrocious. Part of the problem too is that this book was 3 shorter stories that they just mashed together.
Yeah, I'd read that somewhere.
Yeah, and they didn't really do anything with it. So the first section, it's 99% info dump conversations between Haim and other characters, and most of them repeat things that happened in previous conversations. It's 100 and some pages of just the same conversation happening over and over and over and over again. That's the only way the plot progresses, is because they tell you exactly what's going to happen. And part of my issue with that is that some of the things that they say out loud are things that would just be known entities if you existed in this universe. So it's telling instead of showing, which annoys me to no end. Off a lot of time describing in detail things that didn't matter at all. What outfit Heim decided to put on and like what he had for lunch instead of actually using that time for any real exposition. And instead you got all of the plot, motivation, and exposition from just these conversations, and then they threw you into the next part of the story.
There was stuff that described like setting and scenery at times, but when it comes to like a world like this where it's like still Earth, it's still conceptually something that we could imagine, it's like, why are you spending so much time describing clothing and food when like nobody cares? That's not world building at all.
Some detail is one thing, but not in exchange for things that are important and could be driving.
I just don't think it was used.
I also really struggled. Okay, let's be honest. I really struggled with everything. I hated this book. Full stop. I hated this book so much.
I struggled.
It was
myself.
It's true. I've heard you say a lot of things. I've heard Amber complain about a lot of books.
That's something because I broke your lamp.
You
once
did
with
almost
Washington
break my lamp
Irving.
once. That did happen. That is true. There's video evidence.
It's not even that long.
That doesn't matter.
Yeah, no. And Washington Irving was shorter, which might maybe be why I hated it. No, here's the thing. At least he knew how grammar worked. He didn't use it beautifully, but he understood how grammar worked. I still almost broke Sam's lamp with him.
Don't worry, the lamp survived. I still have it.
Yeah. I was reading this and I started reading it before Sam did. And I was like,
True.
This is a terrible book. I hate it. I was like, this is awful.
And then
I was
I
like,
agreed to read it anyway.
yeah, because you're insane. I was texting her and I was like, I think I would rather read like the entire collection of Washington Irving over reading the rest of this book. I hate it so much. She's like, wow.
Like, that's a bold statement.
I do like the work of Washington Irving, though.
I didn't hate like 3 of his stories, but him as an author, I really could not digest
We've all
comfortably.
We've all got one of those.
I went
Here's the
to see
thing.
it.
The story I liked of his the most, the story I liked of Washington Irving's the most, side tangent, apologies, was actually, it reminded me of this like ancient Japanese folktale. And I was like, did he even come up with this?
Was it Rip Van Winkle?
Yeah. And I feel like he just ripped it off of Urashima Taro.
No, it's one of the ones in Quite On, I know.
It's not in Quite On.
There's something that's very similar in Quite On.
Okay, I know
But
that
either
one's
way,
not in there.
This is completely irrelevant.
Yeah, but there's this Japanese folktale that is really great, and Rip Van Winkle is similar. It's eerily similar. He could have easily ripped
But
it off.
anyway, the point was that was a book that Amber hated, and she hated this more.
Quite remarkable that we found something for you to hate even more than something you hated in the first place.
Yeah.
And almost breaking my lamp, truly.
Yeah, it was like as I was reading it, I was like, this is going to lead to a lot of interesting discussion, but also I regret so many of my life choices right now.
But it gives you grounds to say that you've read it and you can complain as much about it as possible.
That's right.
Because you can't really vent about something you've never read.
That's true. No, I feel like it was one of those things where, like, in some ways it was to my detriment that I've read a lot of other, like, sci-fi that came out around the same time that is better. I mean, it all still has problems, right? That's just what you're going to get with something that came out, 70 years ago, basically, at this point, almost. The stuff that's, like, the more, I guess, problematic, like, the author's relationship with women, racial issues, like, all of that I'm used to. It's
Still
not
sucks.
good. I don't love it. There's really only, like, a handful of authors that were writing around that, like, writing sci-fi around that time that I think handle those things well. But that stuff I'm used to. I don't love it and I acknowledge it, but I'm able to look past it when evaluating the book. This is not the issue that I had with this one so much, because as far as those issues go, honestly, this one's, like, probably not the worst.
Yeah, as far as those issues go, this was like a solid medium.
It's just like the way that it's written. I think it takes itself way too seriously. The writing comes across as kind of pretentious, both because of the language thing and also just because, like, why is there so much alliteration? It's super unnecessary.
So he's trying to use words like he's Shakespeare, and I'm like,
Yeah, he's using words that do not need to be in a pulpy 60s sci-fi book. And it also, like, the info dumping makes it so that it's boring. Your eyes glaze over when you're reading it.
yeah. Just like Larry was saying,
Yeah,
like
'cause
it's
the plot's
not
not
memorable.
The way he talked about leaving Earth, though, was pretty intriguing. I like the word choice that he used there. That's one of the few. I think the other attributes to this book you can count on one hand.
I think I did actually write down like 1 or 2 quotes I liked, but I don't remember which one among. I have like 2.5 pages of note, and most of it is me talking shit.
The one I have is from 66 and 67. Heim stood on the bridge and watched his world recede. Still she dominated heaven, vast and infinitely fair, clouds and seas and a sapphire rim of sky. He had observed the continents in their nights and days as he rounded her. Africa, whence man came. Asia, where first he was more than a savage. Europe, where he outgrew myth and measured the stars. Australia, long sought dream. Antarctica, of the heroes, but he was happy that his last sight as he drove starward was of America, where the law was first written that all men are free.
It is a cool description, however, very much a libertarian passage.
And also kind of racist. That was
It's
my
a-
main thought when I read that. Was like,
It's a bit mythical, very well written.
Yeah.
yeah.
I know. I
But-
think that is very well written. And that in that passage in particular, his like use of language works well for him. I don't think it works well throughout the book, but I think that because you're looking for like the scale of like you're leaving a planet and you're looking at it behind you, I think that like grander use of language works in that situation.
I actually remembered that passage. So as you were reading it, I was like, oh yeah, that passage, I remember it specifically. But it was,
I love the drop at the end of like, glad I was looking at America. Like basically freedom reigns, and like that is what, but that is very much like that's where you can see like this libertarian view of like the freedom and equality and everything is here. We don't need to fix anything.
which I think kind of ties it back to the conversation starter, which we've deviated from a little bit.
Well, that's how
About
conversations
liberty.
work.
I don't think he does a
But-
good enough job touching upon liberty, though, because there's nothing in here that's memorable on that front.
No, I just think it's like random sentences in passing.
The whole book is
Mhm.
trying really hard to be something that he didn't accomplish. The whole
Mhm.
book trying so hard and failing.
It's like a strainer where nothing remains in the strainer when you dump the water and the substance in it.
You liked that passage. Like other parts of that you guys particularly did enjoy? Because I know that there was stuff that I liked. I'm gonna check my notes right now, but mostly it's a lot of me not being happy. Is there anything that you guys really appreciated or something you thought was less terrible?
I kind of like the idea of two warriors squaring off. I think that's kind of a cool concept. The honor and respect between them, I like that. But that's one aspect of it that I did enjoy. But that's about it, really.
I think more of the layout, that what they were attempting to do as opposed to how it was executed. I like the idea of Heim going against the establishment in order to do what he felt was the right thing.
That could tie into the libertarian theme as well.
Yeah,
there,
and
right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Ultimately, Heim succeeded. That was an upswing. I think that attempting to flesh out constitutions is an interesting concept. It doesn't really do anything for me in this case.
That was when I was becoming less bored with the book.
I will
There's
say I
potential.
appreciate-
There's potential in the ideas in there that I like. You know, like I like the ideas. I just don't like the way that they come out. You know, this guy trying to assemble this crew to go rescue people. You know, it's a cool idea, but it just doesn't work out. It's just because all this other crap with the relationships and all that, it all gets in the way. It could be just a pure, simple story.
And they're very paper thin too. The characters in here are they're one trick ponies. Vides, who he sings a lot.
Yes, it's his character. He sings a lot.
That's
And
his
then
whole personality. He sings a lot.
Oh,
The daughter, she just giggles. That's her whole personality. She giggles.
the other
Um,
women, they just have sex with Heim, apparently.
Listen.
You have Heim, who is he's trying to make his
So
way
the
through
only
the pe-
characters you get any real motivations for are Heim.
Yeah.
Say, no, you get a motivation for Heim, and you get a motivation for the other like leader whose name escapes me at this moment.
Vides?
Yeah, it's
Sadney?
like it's a word
Selvays or
that did
something.
not process in my brain. This is very clearly like pro-war. This we have to fight because somebody has to win. But I like that you can see both of their motivations, and like neither of them is necessarily painted as right or wrong. They're just
And-
both like, this is how I feel about it, and we're gonna have to duke it out.
And libertarianism and pro-war go together like oil and water.
So I did find a quote that I like. The human race is nothing but a species. Individuals are responsible for what they personally do. And I like that because I think a lot of times people are like, oh, this one person represents a whole group of people or everybody or this entire concept. And I'm like, no, I think every person is an individual person. And unless they are specifically acting as the part of a group of people, I think that it's honestly annoying to me when like a single person's actions reflect a whole group of people. So I really liked that quote.
I agree. It does say a lot about humanity in general. I think those kind of things. That's where Anderson is able to do well when it comes to crafting words. However, a book is supposed to be more than just sentences. It's supposed to actually flow.
Which honestly, I can read a book about a bad story if it's written well. As long as it's not like overtly offensive, I can still appreciate parts of it as long as it's beautifully written. Because to me, that in itself is an art form. The grammar in this was so offensive to me that every couple seconds I would just sigh heavily. And I'm like, this is.
That's true. I heard her reading it, and that did happen.
And I'm like, I just turned to Sam. I was like, this is literary. It was not good.
It's just funny because like different side of that same coin, like outside of the writing, honestly, one of my biggest issues with this is, so like I've talked about this at length on like my channel specifically, but one of the things I love about science fiction is that it's a really good way of making you think about things that are really going on in the world. And it's because it removes you from the situation and lets you look at it from a totally outside perspective. The problem with this book is I think that Anderson was trying to do that, but he was too on the nose. It doesn't remove the reader from the situation because A, it's still Earth, B, it's still like familiar military terms. You can directly tie it to the conflict that was going on at the time. And so what happens then is it doesn't cause the reader to question anything because it too closely parallels something they already have an opinion about, most likely. What ends up happening is it just reinforces what you already, and so it's like an opinion piece that's only being read by people that agree with it. And I like when it causes you to like reflect inward and think, maybe there's something I'm not seeing here. And I just don't think that this did that. I mean, there's like the semi-obvious, like slight racial problems. The descriptions of the women are not wonderful. Not as bad as some I've read, certainly.
Right. Again, still like medium as far as that era,
but like,
that genre go.
But like as far as like women in particular go, they're very much only introduced to move the male protagonist's plot forward, and they don't have any real autonomous function on their own. So I think that's something that, even though it's relatively common of the time and not some that like we may have read, still should be acknowledged. It's not great.
Yeah, it didn't age well.
I agree.
Any final thoughts?
No, it's pretty forgettable.
Alrighty then, how would we rate this? 0 to 5 stars with half stars permitted. Let's start with you, Larry.
I'm going to go 2. I'm giving it 1 because, like I was saying earlier, I like a lot of the premises. I think that if handled better, this could have been a lot of fun. And I'm going to give it another 1 because I don't really have a reason.
Yes.
Because you feel like it, and that counts.
Because I feel like it. Because number 2 popped into my head. And
I remember one.
I like it.
That's
I
fair.
remember one time you gave something, I think it was a 4.5, and I asked, where do you take that half star off? And he said, at the second half of that last star.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. I love that so much. Basically, he does what he wants.
Which is honestly her motto.
True. I do what I want when I want.
It's kind of my motto, but I don't flaunt it.
Oh, I do. I don't give a shit.
I don't know. I would say maybe 1.5, maybe 1. I don't know. I'm vacillating between a few different opinions. Towards the end, I was curious about what was going to happen. So that's where I think that half comes from. Mostly, I just really hated this book. A lot. I feel like I'm probably closer to 1, honestly.
I'd probably say it's like between 1.5 and 2 as well. Part of that for me is because it became really predictable. I can't go fully 1 star because I've read way worse in the same genre, in the same like time frame. It's definitely not one I would recommend, especially if you're new to like older science fiction. Don't pick this one up first. It will turn you off to the whole genre.
If you've read every other book in the time period and the genre, I still wouldn't recommend it.
Well, yeah, I'd still certainly wouldn't like choose to pick it up knowing what I know now. It's definitely not the worst thing I've read. So I'd say between 1.5 and 2.
I'm going to give it a 1.5. I feel that it had so much potential, and I think that there were areas that Anderson was strong. The characters, their structure, and their development was so poor and so stereotypical. The world was not interesting. It failed to achieve whatever it set its mind out to doing. The way that they utilized language and accents was either cheap or it was sickening. The way that they...
Yeah, it was appalling. It was carefully done.
The way that they...
I even know some French. And I was still annoyed by how much French they used. And they used other languages too. And I was just like, what are you doing?
Well, and when they did it, the accents in English, they just like they wrote them badly.
They just they just swap letters. Not always the same letters either. It's sometimes they will use an S and sometimes they won't. That's not language. That's just gobbledygook. That's not what you can. That's not a language.
Going to sound insane. Kind of want to read one of Anderson's later books.
You're right. It does sound insane.
I know. Whatever. You said you were going to read the next 52.
Yeah. And you know what? I didn't.
No, No, I kind of want to read one of his later books because, again, it's a sub-genre, it's a sub-time period I'm super familiar with. I want to see if he got any better.
I'm so morbidly curious, but I'm really not that morbidly
I'm not
curious.
going to make you do it. I will read it and let you know.
Okay, good.
I'll
would
go
be
with the one that
willing
has
to
the
read
highest rating on
more.
Goodreads.
I'm going to read more by him, but I highly encourage people not to read Star Fox.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
not read this one at all. Like, don't.
I'm gonna say, if you guys read the same one, I could be convinced
But no,
to jump on board maybe.
My general
Maybe.
opinion is if you want to enjoy your reading experience, this is not the book to do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
But if you want to hate read something, maybe.
He's also written short stories, so if I can ever find them, because I got
This
my...
still might not be the book to do it, honestly. It's like not bad enough to be so bad it's good. Like it's just kind of like, well, that happened.
Yeah.
Haim also appeared
I
in
could at least
another
laugh at
book of
50
books.
Shades.
I laughed at the word peacemonger. I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah, I did read online that there is a second book that features Haim.
Yes.
That's probably not the one I'm going to choose to go with. I'm going to look at Goodreads. I'm going to see what has the highest like overall like average rating, and if it's one of his later books, that's probably what I'll go with. Partly because that'll be easier to find.
Probably, yeah.
There might be an audiobook, which would have been immensely helpful.
That would have
for
been
this.
so helpful.
Yes,
Because I really looked.
so did I.
I searched YouTube. I searched every bit of Google. It does not exist.
These kind of authors, though,
I was
when they're...
actually almost tempted to ask somebody to come over.
And read it to you.
Yeah. I didn't know anybody who would take the bait though.
When certain writers are niche to a certain genre, especially speculative genres, they seem to garner a lot of views, because I filmed reviews of lesser-known horror writers or those that are not necessarily spoken about the way that Stephen King is. I've noticed that they do pick up a deal of attention from people that are into the genre, because it's
I
not
will say
as
the
saturated.
Yeah,
The
'cause
worst
people are just looking for
vintage
stuff
sci-fi-
so they can hear about it.
The worst vintage sci-fi I ever read, when I read it, only had 2 reviews on Goodreads. It was very bad.
Just to show you, it didn't stand the
She
test
has
of
a
That's
time.
review of it
surprising.
on her channel.
I sure do.
It's entertaining to watch the review. I will never read the book.
I had a lot of feelings. I got very animated.
And can I just also comment on the fact that you started off by like cracking open
Like chugging a High
shit-
Life.
Yeah, a Miller High Life. Miller is a beer that's really popular here in Milwaukee.
It's kind of popular. Everybody's not as popular as Bud, but like,
Well,
yeah,
yeah.
Milwaukee's from here.
Yeah,
Or
it's
Milwaukee
Miller.
is where he lives. Miller is from Milwaukee.
It's from here, so we all know of it. For like people who enjoy craft beer, like the two of us, it's a shit beer.
It's a big
Mm.
bucket
It's
hit,
for a shit book or whatever. And I was like, I can feel that.
which was also partly because I just had a bunch left over from hosting Christmas. But still, that's the worst. It had 2 Goodreads reviews, and they were both like 1 star. And I still read it because I hate myself.
Apparently.
And
Yeah, you joined this one after I was bitching about this book already.
I figured it couldn't be worse than that. And you know what? It wasn't. That book was called Sunstop 8. If anybody wants to really watch me slowly losing my mind, there's a review of it on Sarcasm and Sci-Fi.
One of my favorite things to do is I go in January of 2021. This will be up in early 2022. I looked through my Goodreads and checked out the 10 best books that I read according to Goodreads ratings and the 10 worst according to Goodreads ratings. And it was fun to compare
That's
the
interesting.
general notes to my own. The good ones I liked. The bad ones, there were some that many of them I didn't like. There were some of them that I actually did. Granted, most of Harry Potter was dominant in the top
Yeah, those are going to be highly skewed, I would say.
because there's a
No,
great
Sunstop 8, just to give a little taste of the things about it that were just like so lovely. Illustrations at the start of every chapter.
Oh no.
And they looked like my nephew drew them when he was 7.
Already, if anybody's interested in checking out The Star Fox by Paul Anderson, which after watching this discussion, I'm pretty sure you really shouldn't.
I don't know why you would.
Here is a copy of my books. I got this secondhand. I didn't have to pay much.
Good.
Not surprised. I think I got mine secondhand too.
I read it on Scribd.
Oh shit, I don't even have Scribd anymore. I bought it on Kindle. I'm so
Mhm.
mad I spent money on it.
My month of Scribd is how much that book cost on Kindle.
Well, the thing I learned from all this is that these things are lost to time for a reason.
Some of them, yeah. Some of
Yeah.
them are hidden gems for sure, but
Not this one.
not this one.
It's unfortunate because
That's a video
I like to be able to find
Sci-fi-
and
old sci-fi
promote
hidden
hidden gems, but this is not it. Be sure to join us next time on another episode of.
No.
You don't want people joining us
Very
again?
lucky.
I wasn't sure if you were
Yeah, I don't
waiting
know
for
what's happening.
us or
Yeah, we can do it. I'll do it.
I did it. I was real late.
You did do it.
I was
Already
real late.
Be sure to join us
That's the
next
worst.
time on another episode of Literary Gladiators. For now,
There you go.
keep reading.
Next time on Literary Gladiators, we will be discussing Randall Jarrell and the death of the Bolter Gunner, who was a poet from World War II, among many, and we're looking at this book, Poets of World War II. Please join us on Literary Gladiators the next time.